So first of all, I just want to thank Elon for coming. Hungry.
Absolutely.
You didn't even have dinner, and we didn't even feed you
No,
properly.
sorry to be a bit late.
Oh, no.
I just came from the Tesla factory in Fremont.
Yes. Was something wrong?
There's always something wrong.
Did you have to like?
At any given point, there's always something wrong.
Yes.
Because there's just too many things going on.
Yeah.
So, I mean, one of the trickiest things about a car is that there's thousands of individual components, there are thousands of unique components, and even if one of those things is missing, you can't make cars.
Yes.
So, I mean, today's fiasco was, I kid you not, we were missing $3 USB cable. Okay, so we could not complete cars because
So the whole line was stopped.
yeah,
So
essentially because it's part of the wiring harness, so you can't put the interior in without this cable. And so we could either make a whole bunch of cars minus an interior, which means that you got to stack them up in the yard.
The resale value would be no good.
Well, it can be done, but it's then things go out of sequence.
Oh, right.
And it's way more. It's way more inefficient. You don't have a moving production line that you have to send people out to hundreds of cars that are sort of sitting in the storage yard, and so and this happens to be a particularly pernicious cable that's kind of like routed under the carpet and in a difficult place, and it's literally $3. So we basically had to send people throughout the Bay Area to go and buy USB cables.
Like literally Radio Shack. You like
Fry's.
Oh, Fry's. Oh, that's better.
You can have a hard time getting a USB cable right now at Fry's.
Oh, really?
We bought every one of them.
That's good.
And so we were able to continue production. And I don't want to belabor the anecdote, but essentially the supplier is in China, and we had Plan A and Plan B. And Plan A was like the normal supply chain process. And but what the supplier did was instead of sending our parts in their own package, they grouped it together with a bunch of other stuff for other companies and sent that all via some extremely slow boat from China to LA. And when it got to LA, the other stuff didn't pass customs.
Oh.
And so they wouldn't let our stuff through because
they put it in like a barrel of fruit or something.
I don't know what they put it in.
Yes.
But there's something that customs didn't like, and the paperwork wasn't in order or whatever. So it got stuck there for like a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
And then we had Plan B. So we called them and said, look, you've got to air freight some of these cables, because they're little cables, to us. And we talked to their U.S. subsidiary and ordered from the U.S. subsidiary, who then communicated to China. But then, because this was another batch of parts, it was kind of double the order, it exceeded the credit limit that we had.
Oh, yeah, you got it.
So it bounced off their credit limit, so they didn't ship it.
Fascinating. So someone's losing their job now. This is, no, I'm kidding. No, you shouldn't fire anyone.
It's pretty farcical.
Oh,
and anyway, so it's coming like tonight at 11 p.m. or something.
Wow. And these things are happening like all the time. This was like an unusual circumstance.
Yeah. That's like one example, but there's many things like that.
So I guess, that's actually a really good example, because that kind of leads into what I've always been fascinated by a lot of what you're doing is, I'll start with, how did you get into this?
Into cars?
Into cars, into taking over NASA, not taking over NASA,
right.
Being a contractor for NASA.
For the record, we're not taking over NASA.
You're not taking over NASA. They're an independent organization. But you all are becoming a major provider of services for NASA. Obviously, kind of internet payments and payments generally. These are three completely different spaces. I think a lot of people would not take someone seriously if they kind of had a business plan in one of these.
Right. Sorry to eat.
You take your time. What was your? Did you always think you were going to be doing this, or when did it dawn on you that you would try to revolutionize three industries?
Well, when I was in college, I didn't actually expect to do it. So it was not like this is some long fulfilled expectation. But when I was in college, I thought about what are the areas that would most affect the future of humanity, in my opinion. And the three areas were the internet, sustainable energy, and space exploration, particularly if humanity becomes a multi-planet species. There's kind of like a pretty substantial bifurcation in our sort of future if we're either out there among the stars on multiple planets, or if we're confined to Earth until some obviously eventual extinction event.
Yeah.
Not that I'm pessimistic about life on Earth. I mean, I think some things are likely to be good.
But even
more likely to be good by far.
Yellowstone's due for an explosion every several
right,
hundred thousand.
exactly.
Shanu knows about that. Yeah. Yeah. It's been 700,000 since.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But
yeah.
Super volcano, for those of you who don't know, it would envelop the, well, sorry.
Yeah, no, exactly. I know exactly what you're talking about. Exactly. So
we read the same books, I can tell.
Right, absolutely. I mean, something bad is bound to happen if you give it enough time. And civilization has been around for such a very short period of time that these timescales seem like very long, but on a evolutionary timescale, they're very short.
Yeah.
A million years on evolutionary timescale is really not much. And Earth's been around for 4.5 billion years.
Yeah.
So that's a very tiny amount of time, really. But for us, that would be. I mean, can you imagine if human civilization continued at anything remotely like the current pace of technology advancement for 1 million years? Where would we be?
Yeah.
I mean, I think we're either extinct or on a lot of planets.
Yes, we should.
Those are the two options.
But given that, I mean, one, that's kind of as epic as one can think about things. I mean, literally. I mean, how did you make that concrete? How does that turn into SpaceX, Tesla, and PayPal?
Well, so I thought about these things kind of in the abstract, not from the expectation that I would actually have careers in those arenas, but I wanted to be involved in at least one of them.
Mm-hmm.
And at first I thought the best bet was going to be electric cars.
Yeah.
And so the area that I was studying was advanced capacitors. Right? So essentially capacitors that have an energy density exceeding that of batteries. Because they have a very high power density, but low energy density.
Yeah.
We have a lecture to that effect.
Oh yes, no, we should do that. We'll go later. But yeah.
Exactly. Obviously, if you could make a capacitor that had anywhere near the energy density of a battery, and with its incredibly high power density and its quasi-infinite cycle and calendar life, then you would have an awesome solution for energy storage in mobile applications. Yeah. So that I was going to sort of work on that and try to leverage the equipment that was developed for advanced chip making and photonics to create ultra precise capacitors at the molecular
And this is when
level.
you were going into grad school?
Yeah,
you had a brief stint at Stanford.
That's right.
For a PhD in applied physics?
Applied physics, material science.
Right. This is what you were, so even then you were thinking of kind of trying to do something in the space.
Well, actually this was to work on energy storage solutions for electric cars.
Yeah.
And I'd actually worked at a company in Silicon Valley called Pinnacle Research, which did advanced capacitors. They were electrolytic capacitors, but the problem, and they actually were pretty good. They had like the energy density of a lead-acid battery, which for a capacitor that's a big deal. But they used ruthenium tantalum oxide, and I think at the time there was maybe like 1 or 2 tons of ruthenium mined per year in the world.
See.
So it's not a scalable solution. Yeah. But I thought there could be some solid-state solution, say using chip-making equipment. That was going to be the basic idea. But it was one of those things where I wasn't sure if success was one of the possible outcomes. And it's difficult to bound that problem exactly and say, okay.
So you're saying I felt like this was a destined failure. Is another way to parse that sentence. But anyway, sorry.
No, I didn't think it would fail, but I wasn't sure that success was a possibility.
Okay. Yes.
And generally, you want to embark on something. It's desirable to figure out if success is at least one of the possibilities.
Right. Exactly.
Because for sure, failure is one of the possibilities.
Yes.
But ideally, you want to try to bracket it and say success is in the envelope of outcomes.
Yeah.
And I wasn't quite sure if that was the case. I think success on an academic level would have been quite likely because you can publish some useless paper, and most papers are pretty useless.
We have a few. Don't take offense. Sorry.
I mean,
we have
how many PhD papers are actually used by someone ever? No,
that's a good point.
Percentage-wise, it's not good.
No.
So it could have been one of those outcomes where you add some leaves to the tree of knowledge.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
and that leap is, nope, it's not possible.
Right.
Like,
Right.
there goes 7 years of my life. So that was one path, and I was prepared to do that. But then the internet came along, and it was like, okay, the internet. I'm pretty sure success is one of the possible outcomes, and it seemed like I could either do a PhD and watch the internet happen, or I could participate and help build it in some fashion. Like I just couldn't stand the idea of watching it happen.
Yeah, yeah.
So so I decided to put things on hold and start an internet company. And that was kind of we worked on internet, like publishing software, maps and directions, Yellow Pages kind of things.
Yeah.
And we had as investors and customers the media companies, so like New York Times Company, Knight Ridder, Hearst.
And this was just at the early stages. I mean, this was like late
95.
95. Oh, so it's really early stages. That's really out the gate. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so then the reason we worked with the media companies is because we knew they had money. Like there was no advertising money in '95.
Right, right.
In fact, the idea of advertising the internet seemed like a ridiculous thing to people. Obviously not so ridiculous anymore, but at the time it seemed like a very unlikely proposition. And a lot of the media companies weren't even sure that they should be online.
Right.
Like what's the point of that? Yeah.
And did y'all think that PayPal was just going to be a simple little internet way to, or do you think it was going to turn into the major kind of transaction processing engine that it is right now?
I didn't expect PayPal's growth rate to be what it was.
Yeah.
So, and that actually created major problems. So we started PayPal on University Avenue.
Oh. Yeah.
After the first month or so of the website being active, we had 100,000 customers.
Really? Wow, I didn't realize it was.
Yeah, it was nutty.
Oh, wow. And how did it start? How did people just even know to use it? And I mean, obviously, both buyer and seller have to be involved.
Yeah. Well, we started off first by offering people $20 if they opened an account, and $20 if they referred anyone.
Oh.
And then we dropped it to $10, and then we dropped it to $5. As the network got bigger and bigger, the value of the network itself exceeded any sort of carrot that we could offer.
So how much money did y'all spend with that kind of $5, $10, $20 incentive to get that critical mass going?
That was a fair amount. I think it was probably $60 or $70 million.
Oh, wow, okay, so it was a
Yeah,
substantial. Oh, okay, so we're not talking peanuts here. Yeah, this is.
Yeah, it depends on your relative scale.
Yeah,
it's a peanut to Google.
Yes, no, that's right, that's right.
Yes, peanut.
Yes, yes.
I mean, like Google's got 50 billion, Apple's got, I don't know, 150 billion, some crazy amount of money.
Wow,
That's just cash.
Yeah, yeah. So it's not an outland. Well, yeah, no, I didn't realize like that was
1%
so
of Google's
core.
cash would be $500 million. So that's 0.1% of Google's cash.
That's true. You're right. That's inexpensive. It's
relative to them, it's pretty inexpensive.
Yeah, well, that's right.
And then we just did a bunch of things to decrease the friction because it's just like bacteria in a petri dish.
Yeah.
So what you want to do is try to have one customer generate like 2 customers.
Yeah.
Okay, or something like that, maybe 3 customers ideally. And then you want that to happen really fast. You could probably model it just like bacterial growth in a petri dish, and it'll just it'll expand very quickly until it hits the sides of the petri dish. And it just slows down.
And then after PayPal, then I mean, to some degree, especially us in Silicon Valley, we kind of understand the internet. We know people. I mean, PayPal is obviously of a scale that is noteworthy. But then SpaceX just seems really, like how did you decide that I'm definitely going to do that? And then like, what's the first thing that you do? Like, how do you even like go out? Like, I don't even know how to start trying to make a rocket company.
Well, neither did I really. And in fact, the first 3 launches failed, so it's not as though it was like, spot on. It's like, did not hit the bullseye.
But even getting the point that you're launching rockets, I don't even know how do you get there? And like, what did you do on, like, one, how did you decide? And then what did you do on day one? Like, who did you call, or did you write a plan? Did you start, I don't even know.
Yeah, actually, I mean, the origin of PayPal or rather SpaceX is that I was trying to figure out why that we had not sent any people to Mars. Because the obvious next step after Apollo was to send people to Mars. So, but what in fact happened was that we sent a few people to the moon, and then we didn't send anyone after that to the moon or Mars or anything. But if you'd asked people in 1969, what would 2013 look like? They would have said there'll be a base on the moon. We would have at least sent some people to Mars, and maybe there'd even be a base on Mars. There'd be like orbiting space hotels, and there'd be all this awesome stuff in space. And that's what people expected. And if you'd said, well, actually, the United States in 2013 will not be able to send anyone to orbit. But I tell you what will exist is that there'll be this device in your pocket that's like the size of smaller than a deck of cards that has access to all the world's information, and you can talk to anyone on planet Earth. And even if you're like in some remote village somewhere, as long as there's something called the internet, they wouldn't know what that means, of course. Then you'd be able to communicate to anyone instantly and have access to all of humanity's knowledge. It's like bullshit. There's no way that that's going to be true. And yet we all have that, and space is not happening. So I was trying to figure out like what was the deal here, and this was like 2001. And it was just a friend of mine asked me what I'm going to do after PayPal. And I said, well, I've always been interested in space, but I don't think there's anything that an individual could do in space because it's the province of government, usually large government. But I'm curious as to when we're going to send someone to Mars. So I went to the NASA website, tried to figure out like, where's the place that tells you that, and I couldn't find that. So I thought, well, like either I'm like bad at looking at the website, or they have a terrible website, because surely there must be a date.
That should be a big date, it
should be like, this should be on the front page. And then I discovered actually that NASA had no plans to send people to Mars, or even really back to the moon. So this was really disappointing. I thought, well, maybe this is a question of national will. Like, do we need to get people excited about space again, and try to get NASA a bigger budget, and then we would send people to Mars. And so I started researching the area, becoming more familiar with space, reading lots of books, and came up with this idea to do something called Mars Oasis, which was to send a small greenhouse with seeds and dehydrated gel. Upon landing, you hydrate the gel. You have green plants on a red background, and the public responds to precedents and superlatives. So we're the first life on Mars, the furthest that life's ever traveled, and you'd have this money shot of green plants on a red background. So that seemed like it would get people pretty excited. So I started getting into this and trying to figure out, okay, well, can I afford to build the spacecraft? Because I had some money as a result of PayPal, but it had to fit within that budget. And I figured we had to do 2 missions, because if we only did one and it failed, then it might have like the opposite effect.
But you were willing to bet the farm, so to speak, on this.
Well, I figured like I was willing to spend half the money that I got from PayPal, with no expectation of return. Because I thought this was just something that was pretty important, and I'm like, it seemed like I could spend half the money on PayPal on this, and it would be, if that got NASA a bigger budget and resulted in us going to Mars, that would be a pretty good outcome.
And when your friends came or your family came up to you and said, look, there's nations that can't do this, you're a guy, but you have some resources, what did you say or do or think?
Well, so I had a lot of friends of mine try to talk me out of starting a rocket company because they thought it was crazy, and one friend of mine made me watch a video of rockets blowing up. And there were just lots of people that thought it was a really crazy idea, and there was some people that had tried to start rocket companies, not succeeded, and they tried to talk me out of it. And but the thing is that the premise for talking me out of it was, well, we think you're going to lose the money that you invest. And I was like, well, that was my expectation anyway, so I don't really mind if I lose. I mean, not mind, but I mean, it's not like I was trying to figure out the rank-ordered best way to invest money, and on that basis, chose space. It's not like that's. I thought, wow.
You weren't looking at like money market bonds, AAA bonds, rocket company.
Like
you weren't like
do real estate. Invest in shoemaking, anything. And space is highest ROI. That is not what that wasn't the premise. I just thought that it was important that humanity expand beyond Earth, and we weren't doing that. So maybe there was something I could do to kind of spur that on. And then I was able to compress the costs of the spacecraft and everything down to a relatively manageable number, and I got stuck on the rocket. the US rockets were way too expensive. I ended up going to Russia, flew to Russia 3 times to negotiate purchase of an ICBM. I tried to buy 2 of the biggest ICBMs in the Russian fleet in 2001 and 2002. And I actually negotiated.
I'll just let that statement stand. I'm not even going to.
I mean, that's.
Well, actually, I have to. Like, who did you call? No, I mean,
you open the yellow pages.
Yeah,
go to
I'm in the market. Like,
Oh.
I mean, how does this? I mean, I don't want to get too much in the weeds, but I am curious. Just this one particular thing. You decided at some point you need to buy an ICBM.
Yeah. Well, actually, at first I tried to buy just a normal launch vehicle that they used to launch satellites.
Right.
Those were too expensive.
I see. I see.
The Boeing Delta II would have cost $65 million each, and so 2 would have been 130, and then I was like, whoa, okay, that breaks my budget right there.
Yeah.
And I tried to negotiate with them, and that was not.
How much does an ICBM go for? I'm curious. What's the market rate for one of those?
Well,
this was right after the fall. It might have gone up.
Yeah, it's gone up a lot since
Right.
then. But in 2001, it would have been about $10 million each so 2 would have been 20, and then I thought I could get the rest of the mission down to also around 10 per. So we'd have a dual mission with like 2 identical launches, 2 identical spacecraft, and for like roughly $40 million, and so I thought that, okay, I can do that.
But you must have had some rocket scientists advising you at this point. I mean, sounds like you were serious. I mean, you were.
Yeah, engaged a bunch of sort of consultants.
Right.
And I kind of started to get familiar with the space industry. But then after the 3rd trip to Russia, I came to realize that I was actually wrong about that on my first premise, that there was a lack of will. In fact, I think that there's a tremendous amount of will in the United States for space exploration. Because the United States is essentially a nation of explorers.
Right.
I mean, it's a distillation of the human spirit of exploration. So of course, it was quite silly of me to think that people lack motivation. But what people don't want to think is that, okay, sending people to Mars is going to be so expensive that they'll have to give up like healthcare or something.
Right.
They're not going to do that. So it's got to be. It's got to be that going to Mars is not going to cause some meaningful drop in their standard of living.
Right.
So if it's like maybe 0.25% or 0.5% of GDP, something like that is palatable.
Right.
Anyway, so I thought, okay, it's not really going to maybe matter that much if I do this mission, because what really matters is having a way. So I was wrong. I thought there wasn't enough will, but there actually was plenty of will if people thought there was a way. So then I decided, okay, well, I need to work on the way.
Yeah.
How hard is it really to make a rocket? In historically, all rockets have been expensive. So therefore, in the future, all rockets will be expensive. But actually, that's not true. If you say, what is a rocket made of? And say, okay, it's made of aluminum, titanium, some copper, carbon fiber, if you want to go that direction. And you can break down and say, what is the raw material cost of all these components? And if you had them stacked on the floor and could wave a magic wand so that the cost of rearranging the atoms was 0, then what would the cost of the rocket be?
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, okay, it's really small. It's like, 2% of what a rocket costs.
Right.
So clearly, be in how the atoms are arranged.
Right.
The other, so you got to figure out sort of, okay, how can we get the atoms in the right shape much more efficiently?
Yeah.
And so I had a series of meetings on Saturdays with people that some of whom were still working at the big aerospace companies, just to try to figure out, is there some catch here that I'm not appreciating? And I couldn't figure out. There didn't seem to be any catch, so started SpaceX.
And you ended up building. I mean, you had some failures, but obviously some huge successes. What was the cost that you were able to build this rocket for relative to what they were being built for before?
So let's see. For the Falcon 1, which is the first rocket we built, and the first 3 flights did not make it. In fact, I mean, we got sort of progressively further, but like the first rocket came and landed maybe a couple hundred yards away from the launch site, and tiny fragments. Anyway, that rocket ended up costing around $6 million.
Wow.
Compared to other rockets in that class, which were about, say, $25 million.
Wow, so significant.
Yeah, it'd be like a quarter.
Wow, wow.
But there's an even better step beyond that, which is to make rockets reusable.
Yeah.
So right now, that is around what our comparison price is, excluding the refurbished ICBMs.
Yeah.
So if you say building a rocket from new, how does the SpaceX rocket compare to a rocket from Boeing or Lockheed? It's about a quarter of the price. However, if we make it reusable, then it can be 2 orders of magnitude cheaper.
2 orders of magnitude cheaper, well, 1/100th the price.
That's right.
So I mean, and I've
For
seen.
you.
For only today, Memorial Day sale. And I've seen some. I mean, y'all are doing like these vertical landings.
Yeah.
Like literally out of like the
Yeah.
1950s, like sci-fi movies.
Yep.
And that's what you're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. Essentially, the rocket needs to come back and land at the launch site, and then reload propellant, take off again. Like an airplane.
And how far do you think we are
reusability.
from that? Like when do you think, like, your best guess, when we'll actually see that happening?
I'm hopeful we can do it next year.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's we've got some ambitious stuff at Khan Academy for the next year too, so we can compare. We're redesigning the site,
Right. We've been working on it for a long time. I should say, SpaceX has been around for 11 years, and thus far we have not recovered any rockets. We've recovered the spacecraft from orbit, so that was great. But none of our attempts to recover the rocket stages have been successful. The rocket stages have always blown up basically on reentry.
Yeah.
Now we think we've figured out why that was the case, and it's a tricky thing because Earth's gravity is really quite strong, and with an advanced rocket, you can do maybe 2 to 3% of your liftoff mass to orbit, typically, and then reusability subtracts 2 to 3%.
Because you have to.
Yeah. So then you go like nothing to orbit or negative.
Right.
And that's obviously not helpful. So the trick is to try to shift that from, say, 2 to 3% in an expendable configuration, to make the rocket mass efficiency, engine efficiency, and so forth so much better that it moves to around maybe 3.5 to 4% in expendable configuration, and then try to get clever about the reusability elements and try to drop that to around the 1.5 to 2% level, so you have a net payload to orbit of about 2%.
But you're doing it at 2 orders of magnitude cheaper.
Yeah, absolutely. Because our Falcon 9 rocket costs about $60 million, but the propellant cost, which is mostly oxygen, that's 2/3 oxygen, 1/3 fuel, is only about $200,000.
Wow.
And it's much like a 747. It costs about as much to refuel our rocket as it does to refuel 747. Within. Pretty close, essentially.
So what I mean, assuming y'all are successful and you all have proven yourself to be successful on kind of these audacious things in the past, I mean, what happens? I mean, that seems like what happens in the next 5, 10 years in the space industry if y'all are successful there? I mean, do we get to Mars? Do we have kind of market forces, commercialization of space starting to happen?
Yeah. Let's see. Well, the first step is that we need to earn enough money to keep going as a company. So we have to make sure that we're launching satellites, commercial satellites like broadcast communications, mapping, and the government satellites that do scientific missions, Earth-based or space-based missions, GPS satellites, that kind of thing. And then also servicing the space station, transferring cargo to and from the space station, which we've done a few times, and then taking people to and from the space station. So we've got to service the sort of needs, Earth-based needs to launch satellites, and that pays the bills. Yeah. But in doing that, keep improving the technology to the point where we can make full reusability work, and we have sufficient scale and sophistication to be able to take people to Mars.
Wow. And so you think this is going to be a reality in what's your best guess of when we're going to have someone on Mars?
I think probably about 12 years.
12. That's
Give or
not.
take 2
And you think it'll be a round trip? It'll be.
Yeah.
It won't just be some type of permanent colony on Mars. Yeah.
I think it's probably a round trip.
Wow. so for
I mean, it's not for sure.
I could talk about this for. I mean, people know
so the aspiration will be a round trip.
Yeah. No, this is mind blowing. And I mean, and then on Tesla, I mean, Tesla is obviously, I mean, from my vantage, it's a huge success. I mean, what do you think is in that industry? Well, one, I mean, I'll ask kind of the same question. What did you think? This is something that GM and Toyota and these massive multi-billion-dollar organizations have been trying. What gave you the confidence to kind of pursue it? And now that it seems to be a huge success, where do you think this industry is going to be in the next 5-10 years?
So with Tesla, the goal is to try to accelerate the advent of sustainable transport. I think it would happen anyway, just out of necessity. Yeah. But because we have an unpriced externality in the cost of gasoline, we weren't pricing in the environmental effects of CO2 in the oceans and atmosphere. That's causing the normal market forces to not function properly. And so the goal of Tesla is to try to act as a catalyst to accelerate those sort of normal forces, the normal sort of market reaction that would occur. We're trying to have a catalytic effect on that.
Yeah.
And try to make it happen, I don't know, maybe 10 years sooner than it would otherwise occur.
Yeah.
That's the goal of Tesla. So that's the reason we're making electric cars and not any other kind of car. And we also supply powertrains to Toyota and to Mercedes and maybe to other car companies in the future to accelerate their production of electric vehicles. So that's the sort of goal there. And so far it's working out pretty well.
I mean, I just saw a news report earlier today that y'all are sold more Model S's than y'all are leading that segment of the industry, the Mercedes S-Class, the BMW 7 Series, or the Lexus LS 400 or whatever it is.
Actually, that seems to be the case. And it's, I didn't realize they sold so few cars in that segment.
That's
because we don't sell that many cars. We sell 5,000 a quarter. 20,000.
Well, out here they seem like every.
Yeah, I mean, this is our home.
Yeah.
It's our home team. So it's we better sell that in the Bay Area.
Yeah.
We're like,
no, but that's and well, I mean, it's a similar thing. I mean, how did you start? What gave you the confidence? And I mean, do you see yourselves? I mean, as kind of a major automotive mainstream brand in 5-10 years, all the way down to kind of the competing with the Honda Accords and Civics.
I mean, our goal is not it's not sort of to become a big brand or to compete with Honda Civics, but rather to advance the cause of electric vehicles. So we're just going to keep making more and more electric cars and driving the price point down until the industry is very firmly electric. Like maybe half of all cars made are electric or something like that, which is not to say that we expect to make half of all cars. We want to just have that catalytic effect until at least that occurs. And I think at the point at which we're approaching half of all new cars made are electric, then I think I would consider that to be kind of the victory condition.
Wow.
So the faster we can bring that day, the better.
Wow. When would be your guess when that happens?
Well, I made a bet with someone about 3 years ago that it would be sooner than 20 years. So it's 17 years from now. But that's, I think, that's conservative. I think it's probably, maybe 13 or 14 years, something like that.
Right about the time.
Happen
right when we're going to Mars.
Right.
It'll be exciting times.
Yeah.
This will be
true. It just could. Yeah. Exactly. As I was thinking about that, it was like, those time frames are kind of coincident.
Yeah.
I mean, the nature of new technology adoption is it tends to follow an S-curve. So what usually happens is people underpredict it in the beginning because people tend to extrapolate on a straight line, and then they'll overpredict it kind of at the midpoint, and because there's late adopters, and then it'll actually take longer than people think at the midpoint, but much shorter than people think at the beginning.
Yeah.
But I'm pretty excited about how things are going. It's in fact, I think I think that the pace of technology improvement is in energy storage, electric energy storage is really moving faster than anyone thinks.
Wow, wow. And I got one more. What are we doing on time? Where's Esther? 9 o'clock. So how much time do you have? I want to make sure people.
Well, I guess maybe another 15 minutes.
Oh, okay, okay. So I'll finish with one last question, then we'll open it up. I mean, what advice do you have for us at Khan Academy?
I mean, you guys seem to be doing really great. So
yeah.
I was wondering if you had advice for me.
Oh no, well.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like you're doing an amazing job of really super leveraged. You know, I mean, obviously a small team, and you're having a dramatic effect on.
Yeah, half these people don't even work here. They're just like, so like it's even, yeah.
Right. It's right. So it's I think very impressive thing you're doing to spread knowledge and understanding, you know, throughout the world.
The universe soon.
Throughout the universe,
if you hold up your end of the bargain.
Yeah. I mean, it's actually kind of funny. You know, if you think of like what is education, like you're basically downloading data and algorithms into your brain, and it's actually amazingly bad in conventional education because like it shouldn't be like this huge chore. So you're making it way better. But I mean, I think a lot of the things that I would say you've probably heard 100 times, and in fact are if not doing. Like the more you can gamify the process of learning, the better. Like for my kids, I do not have to encourage them to play video games.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
I have to like pry them from their hands, like crack.
Yes,
You know?
yes.
It's like drop that crack needle.
Yeah, yeah. You have that problem at your house too.
Yeah,
Yes,
exactly.
The crack is addictive. Yeah.
So it's you know it's to the degree that you can make somehow learning like a game, that then it's better. And I think unfortunately like a lot of education is very vaudevillian. You've got you know, someone standing up there kind of lecturing at people, and they've done the same lecture 20 years in a row, and they're not very excited about it. And that lack of enthusiasm, you know, is conveyed to the students. That they're not very excited about it. They don't know why they're there. Like, why are we learning this stuff? We don't even know why. In fact, I think a lot of things people learn, probably there's no point in learning them. Because they never use them in the future.
Because who's going to launch a rocket into space? I mean, that's just like, yeah, exactly. That never happens.
Well, you have to say, like, people, I think, don't stand back and say, well, why are we teaching people these things? And we should tell them probably why we're teaching these things. Because a lot of kids are just in school kind of puzzled as to why they're there. Like, you know, and I think if you can explain the why of things, then that makes a huge difference to people's motivation. Yeah. Then they understand purpose. Yeah. So I think that's pretty important, and just make it entertaining. But I think just in general, like conventional education should be massively overhauled, and I'm sure you very much agree with that. But yeah, I mean, the analogy that I sometimes use is like if you've seen like Batman, like the Chris Nolan movie, like the recent one, and it's pretty freaking awesome, right? And you've got incredible special effects, great script, multiple takes, amazing actors, and great sound, and it's very engaging. But if you were to instead say, okay, that even if you had the same script, so at least it's the same script, and you said, okay, now that script, instead of having movies, we're going to have that script performed by the local town troupe. Right. Okay, and so in every small town in America, if movies didn't exist, they would have to then recreate The Dark Knight. Right. You know, with like home sewn costumes and like, you know, jumping across the stage, and not getting their lines quite right, and not really looking like, you know, the people in the movie, and no special effects and everything. I mean, that would suck. It would be terrible.
That's right. That's very.
That's education.
That's education. So with that, and I apologize to all of you guys for hogging up all of the time, because obviously I could talk for hours about this stuff. But and we do have time, I think 5 or 10 minutes for a handful of questions. If none of you all have any, I have about 9 more, but yes.
Yeah, so I noticed I picked up 2 kind of themes from what you were discussing. One was somewhat audacious goals, and the other was, I don't think I heard you use the word profit in anything that you spoke about. You seem to be, each thing is pointed at like reinvigorating an industry or bringing back space missions. How much of your success do you attribute to having really audacious goals, or versus just not being focused on the short term, money coming in, or I don't know, investors?
Unfortunately, one does have to be focused on the short term and money coming in when creating a company, because otherwise the company will die. So I think that a lot of times people think like creating a company is going to be fun. I would say it's not. It's really not that fun. I mean, there are periods of fun, and there are periods of where it's just awful. And particularly if you're the CEO of the company, you actually have a distillation of all the worst problems in the company. There's no point in spending your time on things that are going right. So you only spend your time on things that are going wrong. And there are things that are going wrong that other people can't take care of. So you have like the worst. You have a filter for the crappiest problem in the company, the most pernicious and painful problem. So I wouldn't say I think you have to feel quite compelled to do it, and have a fairly high pain threshold. And there's a friend of mine who says like starting a company is like staring into the abyss and eating glass. And there's some truth to that. The staring into the abyss part is that you're going to be constantly facing the extermination of the company. Because most startups fail. It's like 90%, arguably 99% of startups fail. So that's the staring into the abyss part. You're constantly saying, okay, if I don't get this right, the company will die. It can be quite stressful. And then the eating glass part is you've got to do the problems. You've got to work on the problems that the company needs you to work on, not the problems you want to work on. And so that's you end up working on problems that you'd really wish you weren't working on. And so that's the eating glass part. And that goes on for a long time.
So how do you keep your focus on the big picture when you're constantly faced with, we could be out of business in a month?
Well, it's just a very small percentage of mental energy is on the big picture. Like you know where you're generally heading for, and the actual path is going to be some sort of zigzaggy thing in that direction. You try not to deviate too far from the path that you want to be on, but you're going to have to do that to some degree. But I don't want to diminish the. I mean, I think the profit motive is a good one if the rules of an industry are properly set up. So there's nothing fundamentally wrong with profit. In fact, profit just means that people are paying you more for whatever you're doing than you're spending to create it. That's a good thing. and if that's not the case, then you'll be out of business, and rightfully so. Because you're not adding enough value. Now, there are cases, of course, where people will do bad things in order to achieve profit, but that's actually quite unusual. I mean, because usually the rules are set up mostly correctly, like not completely, but mostly correctly.
Well, I think we have time for one more question. Joel, this is
yeah, I have an important one.
Okay, very good. Yes, please.
Okay, so a few months ago you teased Hyperloop, and we haven't heard anything since. So first of all, a few of us engineers were talking about it, and I think we have a few ideas if you need help. But if you feel comfortable, maybe you could tell us a little bit more.
I was reading about the California high-speed rail, and it was quite depressing, because California taxpayers are going to be on the hook to build the most expensive high-speed rail per mile in the world, and the slowest, which is those are not the superlatives you want. And it's like, damn it, like we're in California, we make super high-tech stuff. Why are we going to be spending now the estimates are around $100 billion for something that will take 2 hours to go from LA to San Francisco. I'm like, okay, well I can get on a plane and do that in 45 minutes. It doesn't make much sense. And isn't there some better way to do it than that? If you just say, okay, well, what would you ideally want in a transportation system? You'd say, okay, well, you'd want something that relative to existing modes of transportation is faster, let's say twice as fast, costs half as much per ticket, can't crash, is immune to weather, and is, you can make the whole thing like self-powering with like solar panels or something like that. That would be pretty.
That'd be
a
great.
A good outcome.
Yes.
And so what would do that? And what's the fastest way, short of inventing teleportation, that you could do something like that? And some of the elements of that solution are fairly obvious, and some of them are not so obvious. And then the details, the devil's in the details of actually making something like that work. But I came to the conclusion that there is something like that that could work, and would be practical.
Is this around the evacuated tubes, the vacuum tubes, like at the old bank?
Like that. It's something like that. Yeah.
But you haven't been more public with what this is?
No, although I did say that once Tesla was profitable that I would talk more about it. But we haven't done our earnings call yet, so I think I should probably do it after the earnings call. And the thing is, like, I kind of strung out on the things that I'm doing, so adding another thing.
Yeah.
It's like doesn't, that's
learning the guitar, you could pick up all sorts of things.
Right. I tried learning the violin.
Yes.
That's, by the way, a hard thing to learn.
Yeah. Launching rockets, electric cars, revolutionizing transportation. Yeah, that's easy.
I cannot play the violin at all. Very horrible. If you think about the future, you want a future that's better than the past. Yeah. And so if we had something like the Hyperloop, I think that would be like cool. Like you'd look forward to the day that was working. And if something like that, even if it only was in one place, from LA to San Francisco or New York to DC or something like that, then it would be cool enough that it would be like a tourist attraction. It would be like a ride or something. So even if some of the initial assumptions didn't work out and the economics didn't work out quite as one expected, it would be like cool enough to be like, I want to journey that place just to ride on that thing. That would be pretty cool.
Wow.
And so that's, I think, how, if you come up with a new technology, it should feel like that. You should really, like, if you told it to an objective person, would they look forward to the day that thing became available? And be like, it'd be pretty exciting to do something like that. Or an aircraft. Like, I thought it was really disappointing when the Concorde was taken out of commission and there was no supersonic transport available. And of course, the 787 has had some issues. But the thing is, the 787, even in the best case scenario, is only a slightly better version of the 777. And it's like, okay, not that exciting.
So this is something that you are working on, and one day in the not too far future, or there's some plans or consultants involved or something. You've made some phone calls to Russia.
No, every now and then, like there's like it's sort of percolating away, and then I'm not actively thinking about it, but then there'll be some new element of that. I'll think, oh well, this would make it better.
Fascinating. No, well, I think I'm speaking for everyone. This is like the most epic possible conversation one could have over about the course of an hour. And I think all of us would love to chat with you for hours on end, but thank you so much. I mean, I know you have a lot of free time, so it probably wasn't that big of a deal for you to come here. But yeah, it was a huge honor, and I think it's inspired all of us to go out and change the world and the universe.
Cool.
Thank you very much. No,